Hello, everyone, and welcome to our August TACoS Tuesday. Thank you for being patient. We were a little delayed here, but I'm so glad to see a lot of you are joining already. I'm going to go ahead and bring on our guest, who is a friend of mine, and I'm very excited to have him today. And it's Vincenzo Toscano. Hey, Vincenzo.
Hello, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me, and a pleasure to be here. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing great. And tell everyone where you're at. You're a world traveler, so
Right now, I'm in London, so August for me has been kind of like a slower month. I mean, I still did like 2, 3 trips, but it's lower than usual. And then in September, I retake the traveling around. Yeah.
yeah, you're always somewhere, so it's always fun to hear where you're at. All right, so I wanted to go ahead and let everyone know that's in the that's viewing. If you want to ask some questions, we would love for you to ask some questions so that we can get those answered for you live here with Vincenzo. He's an expert. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the comments section so that we can get them answered. But before we do that, Vincenzo, can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and also your agency Ecomcy?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, at Ecomcy, we are a full Amazon and Walmart brand management agency. So we specialize on everything in terms of listing optimization, PPC, brand creative, international expansion, everything that has to do in terms of all the tasks that your business needs to successfully get scale into these two marketplaces. So we got teams across the world. So we got teams in the US, in Latin America, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So effectively, we're able to cover the full spectrum where specifically Amazon is allocated. And yeah, our main core offering to brands is essentially your one-stop solution when it comes to scaling your brand into these two marketplaces. So yeah, we do everything from A to Z for you.
Awesome. And I think you forgot to mention you speak all over the world too. You've been invited to speak at a bunch of events. So I've seen you speak quite a few times. So
Yes, I do that
yeah.
a lot. Like that's something that, fun enough, I discovered a passion for that. Like I really love to share, things that we do with our brands, my personal experience. At the end of the day, I feel like really giving back to the community and helping so many entrepreneurs and thriving Amazon sellers to get their business to the next phase is one of the best rewards I can ever get. So every single time I jump on stage, I try to give my 1000% for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. Really good. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into it then. I'll ask the first question, and I want to just get some of your best tips for PPC. What are some tips that you
Yeah.
usually share with people?
Of course. So I would say something that I'm very basically been pushing in terms of content is how PPC evolves over time, right? I feel I have seen this mistake so many times, unfortunately, that when we do audits on a daily basis and we have a look at accounts from people that are really struggling, I usually identify that one of the main reasons is because the strategy they basically decided to use for their launch is the same one they've been using effectively for scale, and also the same strategy they've been using for reaching profitability, right? So I would say that's one of the main things sellers have to start understanding, that PPC is not something that you set and forget. And in fact, I guess so many times this conversation from people that, let's say, want to work with us and say, oh, what if you do the campaign once and then I just leave it there and then they're on their own? It's like, it doesn't work like that. Your PPC is going to change constantly, especially in markets such as the US that's so competitive. If you're not on top of the game and you're proactively, adjusting the type of targeting, the type of keywords, the type of bids, the type of ads that you can do, sponsor brand, sponsor a product, sponsor display, it can get very, very, very difficult. Now, in terms of tips, so I would say one of the first thing, and I'm gonna focus now a little bit on the launch side of things because I know that's where most of the sellers really struggle, is you have to understand the setup of campaigns that you do throughout a launch of your product on Amazon is completely different when you are on a profitability mode, right? And that's where I want to really give you as much basically actionable steps so you can then go after this live and implement it throughout your next launch. So when it comes to launching a product on Amazon, the other day, guys, we need to understand that PPC is basically a tool that is there to amplify the success of your product on Amazon, right? Why do I say this like that? Because I feel if your product is the type of product that you feel it's going to require always PPC to be a successful product, unfortunately, I have the bad news for you. That is the wrong product, right? PPC is only there as a tool to, of course, get the momentum going, but where the money really is going to come is from your organic position. Once you understand that initial fundamental, that's going to completely shift your focus in terms of why you do your PPC from day one. We have heard so many times, even from Bradley, like the honeymoon period is the most important thing of your listing on Amazon, right? It's really the foundation of how Amazon basically goes from knowing zero about your product to building a very mature understanding about where your product is basically reflected within a category and what connotation it has to specific keywords. So one of the tip I always give to people when launching a product, try to not get distracted by shiny objects, right? So many times I feel people launching their PPC and they try to do all type of the campaigns from day one. They try to do exact, phrase, broad, automatic, sponsor brand, sponsor display. And the issue with that is that because your product is not mature at all and it doesn't have a really good indexation in the system yet, at the end of the day, you can actually do worse than actually helping. You're confusing the system with so much data from day one. So the tip is usually the first 14 days to 30 days, I only focus on exact match keywords in terms of the way I target them. And I also try to only focus on my 10 to 20 keywords max. I try to not spread myself too thin, because the other mistake, and this is a tip as well, if you start spreading your budget too thin across multiple keywords, you also dilute your efforts. In terms of, when I say dilute your efforts, your budget runs out very fast, or you don't show very high on that specific keyword, or effectively what happens is that you don't even get enough clicks to make a proper optimization. Therefore, from those initial 2 weeks to 4 weeks, you really want to build a strong link between the fact that your product has zero information on Amazon eyes, to the point that once you start targeting this keyword very aggressively with exact match, you create a link, and then that's when you start launching your phrase, your broad, your auto campaigns, and so on, and you start creating that momentum. I'm gonna make a small pause, so I don't know if you're gonna ask something next, but that's a little bit of one of the initial tips I want to give you. Like, focus on only exact match. Try to not dilute your budget across many keywords. That means focus on the core keywords that are really gonna position yourself for success in the future. And at the end of the day, that's gonna allow you to create that initial foundation to then build the rest of the campaigns forward, and also create the basically face in front of Amazon eyes of what your pro actually is and what are the keywords you want to get positioned from.
I think that's really good. Those are good tips, because people are always asking me how many keywords they should focus on for launching and how many per campaign. So that's really, really good info. So in terms of keywords, what is the best way to find those keywords that they should, and then, what kinds of keywords should they be looking for?
Yeah. Well, the answer is, let's see, helium 10. There you go.
Very nice.
So that's the best way of finding the keywords. Like, I mean, we use Helium 10 on our daily basis for finding keywords for our clients. One of the things that is definitely going to be your best tool for that is Cerebro. Like, Cerebro is like the best tool out there when it comes to really filtering down and finding those winning keywords that effectively going to give you the ROAS that you want on your investment. Why that's important? Because at the end of the day, when you start researching a specific category, it's very easy to fall into the trap that you come across 50, 100, 200 keywords, and you start falling into the mindset, oh, if I target all these keywords at once, my chances of success is actually big. And that's actually the opposite. By multiple studies and even case studies we have done internally, usually 70 to 80% of your sales are going to come from 10 keywords most of the time, right? So therefore, once you start understanding that most of the time 10 to 20 keywords are going to be the backbone of your business, if you start diluting yourself on things that effectively, which is what we call the 80-20 rule, you put your efforts on something that's not going to give you the best outcome, that is not going to create the momentum that you want. So we use Helium 10 by analyzing the top 10 competitors on a specific keyword. And once we identify the top 10 competitors, then we use a Cerebro to say, okay, find me the keywords where these competitors are on page one. Okay, and this keywords is consistent across this many number of products, right? Because by using that specific initial filtering, then I'm basically removing a ton of keywords that I know, yes, these competitors are ranking there, but not necessarily they're on page one and on a consistent basis. Because if you're on page one, most likely by nature you got there because you got multiple sales organically, and therefore that's why also that keyword, by being repeated across other competitors, is giving you a validation that the keyword is essentially one of the main keywords of that specific category. So once you find those keywords, that's then where you have to also have some of your insights in terms of what you know about the market. What do I mean by that? If you come across a specific category, I'm going to put you an example like yoga mats. which by the way, very competitive product, guys. So don't do yoga
Mhm.
mats.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you come across yoga mat and you do an analysis of the top competitors, and then on your top 10 to 20 keywords, you start seeing keywords that yes, they are very high in search volume and relevancy, but then you start to identify that some of those keywords have things embedded that your product doesn't have, maybe a specific material, specific shape, specific color. You have to be careful with that, because if you only go blindly by data and then you don't use your analytical mind to then see is actually that has some kind of relevancy to my product, you can also fall into the trap of targeting the wrong keywords. So that's how we find the keywords. Then of course we can start going deeper into the strategy in terms of, okay, what kind of CPC I want to go for. And for example, with Helium 10, you also get certain averages. So you can say, at the moment, I can only afford this keyword, or I can afford that keyword. But you
Mhm.
can go even an extra layer and focus on title density. So to focus on keywords that are less competitive. So there are many verticals you can take from there. But the basics is that top 10 competitors, finding them where are these on page one on a consistent basis, at least 40 or 50% of those products. And those are usually my starting point to then go deeper and filter down. Yeah.
Okay. This question from Eric kind of goes along with what you're saying. What if the first 15 to 20 keywords for exact match don't get enough traffic? Also, the bid can get very expensive as well.
Yeah. So if you come across that essentially the search volume is not high enough, first of all, that's a red flag, because this is actually something, guys, that you should do from the very beginning. Like all this process that I'm being described in terms of keyword research has to be part of your pro research. Like something I do with all the products that we launch and I launch, even if the product is a super winning Amazon eyes in terms of the data, and I also validate with Helium 10, I still need to figure out my profitability is on point. So what do I mean? Answering your CPC cost per click question. If I then have a look at the cost per click average, right, and that cost per click average in correlation to the average of the conversion, which you might ask yourself, how do I get access to this data? You have brand analytics. You can, with brand analytics, have an understanding what is the average of conversion. With that, if you start making the math of this is the cost per click, this is the average conversion, and I pay X amount of dollar for a product, you know, sometimes mathematically, even if you're position number one on all the keywords and you put a minimum your PPC, you're never going to be profitable. So that's the first thing you have to do before launching any product, making sure that within your margin, even in the ideal scenario, you have the best conversion, your rank and everything, the margin allows for the average of CPC. Now, when it comes to search volume, you're gonna find sometimes products that are gonna be surprising in terms of why this product, for example, is doing $20,000, $30,000, but then when I have a look at the keywords don't really resemble that level of demand. It's like very small keywords. Usually that happens because you're gonna find a term in the Amazon space called outlier keywords, right? Keywords that go beyond the scope of the product itself. So I'm gonna give an example. There was this specific product we were working with, which was like a kit to do things in the kitchen, right? Like doing a specific type of cakes here and there and all of that. But when you go around the actual keywords of the product, the search volume wasn't high enough. And then we started to see, but yes, there's these two, three competitors are doing high their revenue. How they're getting all these sales? When we went deeper into the research, we identified that they were ranking for things such as gift for mom, gift for girlfriend, cooking, cooking accessories. Words are very broad. And when you go on those broad, we're talking thousands of search volumes. So that's also something you have to be very careful when you do pro research, because if not, you might feel, oh yes, this product do X amount of revenue with these very easy to get keywords, but most of the time I can guarantee you is because they have some of these outlier keywords that are pushing the level of revenue. And to conclude, if the search volume you feel is not high enough to, you know, create the momentum of sales, something I will try to do is try to attack, for example, accessories that go along with your product. When I have limitation on the keyword level, my best friends is async targeting. Because, for example, let's say you're selling, again, a yoga mat, and let's assume the search volume is very low. And then you're struggling, like, okay, all the keywords I have to do yoga mats like have a low search volume. I'm really struggling to scale this product. What should I do? Then you start using your mind and saying, okay, but actually people that buy yoga mats, but they buy yoga blocks, or they buy yoga water bottles, or they buy leggies, you name it. So what you do is you start targeting with async targeting those products, and then you try to essentially, even if you cannot win at the keyword level, you can try to create some kind of profitability by targeting accessories that go with your niche. So that's usually a way you can mitigate that. But again, in conclusion, you're gonna find that if then the search volume is really to a point that's super super minimal, the only savior, if I'm honest with you, is going for outlier keywords, which that by itself means you're gonna require a higher budget that you anticipated, because usually those are like very big keywords you have to attack. Yeah.
Those are all really good points. Keyword research is super important, and when you're doing product research, for sure.
Mhm.
Let's get into some more questions that people have. If I have a well-performing search terms in an auto campaign that I want to start exact campaigns for, should I negate those keywords in the auto campaign or keep them active in the auto campaign?
Yeah, I always get this question. It's a good one. So essentially what happens is that as you start running your auto campaigns, and as I say, usually recommend starting your auto campaigns at least 2 weeks or 4 weeks after launching your product. In fact, you can do this exercise. If you try to create a phrase broad auto campaigns from day one, even exact match campaign, you go to the suggested keyword tab, which Amazon generates keywords for you. You're gonna see that's empty, right? And that's effectively the theory and the behavior we have identified. If Amazon doesn't have history about your product, why are you gonna give them basically a empty field for them to run like crazy and not really have a direction? What is the real path towards success, right? So once you generate that with exact match keyword campaigns, when it comes to auto campaigns, those are going to be your best friends. When it comes to keywords that sometimes you're going to struggle to find, for example, within them, and that's normal because sometimes auto campaign, what it's gonna do is it's gonna find like very very small long tails that have a lower search volume or very specific, that sometimes the reason why they are so specific is that they come with specific trends throughout the year, or they just they come and go. So the auto campaign is going to ensure that catch basically the low hanging fruit. And once you identify these keywords, let's say you start identifying one that start to become very repetitive in cells. Like when I say repetitive, it's at least 3 to 5 cells. If it's only one cell, like I wouldn't necessarily move it to exact match campaign yet, because I want to allow it to prove itself, right? Once I move it, something you want to do, and this applies to all your PPC strategy, you have to follow always a hierarchy. Exact is the king, right? Then you have phrase, then you have broad, then you have auto campaigns. Why this is important? Because the other mistake I see a lot is, let's say you have a bid in your auto campaigns of $1, right? And then you move the keyword to an exact match campaign, you put it 50 cents, right? By nature, the auto campaign on Amazon is still going to have high priority across your whole account, and it's going to eat most of the budget, and most likely it's going to have priority in terms of a placement visibility compared to the exact version of that keyword. So that's very important. If you move it, the bids on those new campaigns have to be higher than your auto campaigns. Once you move it, I usually don't like to negate it. I'm going to tell you why. You're going to find that your auto campaigns, usually you end up in placements that you don't end on manual campaigns. And this is because Amazon essentially, when you work with lower bids, they have like what we call like lower tier actually placements that they usually are attributed more to auto campaigns. So you're going to find that for some specific keywords, and this happened to us all the time, we move the same keyword to a manual campaign, and we start getting a higher CPC or conversion drop significantly, because even if you think you're targeting the same keyword, it goes an extra layer. It's not only about targeting the keyword, it's about how Amazon actually showcase those impressions in different placements. Therefore, for me, I don't negate it, because if, let's say I have yoga mat at $1, it came at a $1 average CPC on my auto campaigns. Then I move that to my manual exact. I will start at least at 120, so I have that hierarchy defined. But then I wouldn't fully remove from my other campaigns, at least at the beginning, because I want to see if the behavior of my new campaign is effectively reflecting the reason I moved the keyword in the first place. If I see that after a while that behavior start to happen, then usually yes, I like to negate on my auto campaigns and move it to exact. But the reason for that is because some of the when it comes to optimization that we haven't really got deep as of now, one of the things that can get very confusing, especially when you start targeting multiple listings on your account and so on, is the illusion of essentially data that will define clear KPIs. What do I mean by that? Let's say you're targeting yoga mat from an auto campaign, and then you're targeting yoga mat from an exact match campaign. the same keyword is being targeted from two fronts. But then when you're gonna do optimization, they in Amazon eyes they are seen as two different search terms because they are under different campaigns. So you're not quantifying the real success of the keyword combined, right? You're seeing them separated. And if you start doing that across multiple campaigns, what is gonna happen is you might fall into the trap of sometimes thinking Akira is a loser when actually it's a winner, where you combine the efforts of all the other impressions it's having across other campaigns. So therefore, you want to make sure over time, if the campaign is performing better for a specific keyword on a specific placement, that's the one you leverage, and then over time you start negating the rest until you have single point of contacts for every single keyword long term.
All right, let's go on to the next one.
Mhm.
I'm starting to build campaigns and bidding rules in Atomic. When looking at ACoS and setting goals, should I look at ACoS data from our past campaigns, or is there a set percentage for ACoS for certain products?
Yeah, so ACOS at the end of the day, it goes a little bit with the tip I was saying at the beginning. It has to be tailored to your strategy in terms of your journey, launching, scale, profitability, because it's different the ACOS you're gonna target as a brand when essentially the product is completely new compared to when it's very stable. And I'm gonna give an example so you can essentially visualize what I'm gonna explain next. So let's assume when you go start selling on Amazon, you had an ACOS of 80%, which again, when you launch on Amazon, being over 50% is normal. 50 to 100% is usually the bandwidth I try to be when launching. Usually, the thing that is most important throughout this phase is actually not even the ACOS, it's conversion, right? Because when you're launching on Amazon Nice, it's not about making money, it's about the new traffic I'm giving to the new kid in the blog. How is this a person behaving with this new set of traffic? And therefore, in Amazon Eyes, if I get as many conversions as possible, which effectively is sales, that is going to allow me to get more and more placement organically indifferently of the ACOS. That's why the initial ACOS of the initial 2 months, I wouldn't use that as baseline to do what I'm gonna do next after my scale and profitability, because here the focus is not ACOS, is making sure I get positioned organically. Therefore, long term, I can dilute my efforts from my PPC perspective, so I have lower expenses, and at the same time, the sales that start coming organically are gonna make my overall revenue bigger, and therefore my TACoS, which is my true ACOS, is gonna get lower and lower, and therefore that's where the profitability kicks in. Now, when it comes to setting the goal, something you have to also be mindful is ACOS is highly related as well to your profitability. Okay, why? Because it's not the same the level of aggressiveness I'm gonna do with a product that have 50% margin, the product that have 10% margin, right? Because that defines by itself like how much extra room you can allow to lose money for a specific period of time, and you can budget for it. Therefore, the first question you have to ask yourself, like, do a P&L, see what is the basically margin you can allow yourself in terms of, let's say you identify that your margin is 20%. Once you identify that your margin is 20%, usually a good rule of thumb is that if my margin is 20%, then I should be my ideal ACoS for breaking even, for example, is 20%. But usually what I do as a rule of thumb towards launch, I double it. So whatever is my breaking point, I do 2 to 3 times. So that means I can afford 40 to 60% ACoS. And usually that's gonna be like your bandwidth you need to play in between, right? And then you, of course, you start diluting until you get back to 20%. And then eventually with the organic sales that are gonna kick in, that's gonna make you lower and it's gonna make you profitable. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is from
Mhm.
Zeal. If I pause campaigns and enable it, will it perform the same way before or not? It will take time before it gets better, or will it take time before it gets better performance?
Good question. So essentially, what I guess the question is about is, let's say I have a super winning campaign that was in 2000, I don't know, 2020. I put it off. I put it on again now. Will it perform the same? Unfortunately, no. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because Amazon, when it comes to PPC, is all about history, right? And when I say history, is even if it's off, the account is attributing history in the backend, even if you think it's not. So if you put a campaign off on Amazon Ads, essentially you are diluting your efforts and you push toward a specific keyword, and therefore the KPIs, which is clicks, impressions, and everything for that keyword and campaign, goes to zero. So every single day you're basically quantifying zero data for that campaign. What happens over time is that on Amazon Ads, that campaign essentially become obsolete. It's essentially have lost the momentum that was getting built, and therefore when you launch the campaign again, it's gonna be tough to regain the same kind of performance, because by the time you put it on again, just all the basically good data that was there is essentially lost, right? Because of that. Therefore, yes, if you put a campaign off, I mean, if you do this over a period of, I would say max 3 months, you shouldn't see a significant move. But I would say 3 months is already too much, because your PPC, unfortunately, is also highly affected by what your competitors do. If your PPC was performing at a certain ACoS and click to rate, right, on that specific keyword, and now the baseline of what success looks like at the keyword level is different, because now a bigger player came into the space and he set the bar higher in terms of what click to rate and what a time of conversion essentially you need to perform on top of the game for this keyword. Now your what you had already is not anymore competitive enough, and therefore the PPC is not gonna perform effectively. In fact, I can tell you, and we have many case studies about this. We have clients when they had, for example, a product that's been converting super good for 5 to sometimes even 8 years, like very long accounts, and then we are targeting a specific keyword, okay? And then when we go on that specific keyword and we try to target on another account, that is same type of setup and everything, the a client that had a 7-8 years of history is sometimes paying 50% less cost per click. Why? Because on Amazon Ads, you have performed so well for such a long period of time that I'm willing to keep you at a preferential cost per click, because I know that you're super efficient with the traffic I put throughout the door. Therefore, even if this guy is willing to pay more, still he's not on top of his game to make sure the sale is converted, and therefore me as Amazon get my 15% cut. So that's another thing you have to take consideration.
All right. Next question. What search volume of keywords should I target for launching? Some keywords have huge search volume and are hard to rank on page one immediately.
Yeah. Some search volume, something that you have to do, and this is also another tip, guys, when it comes to creating your PPC campaigns, something that is key is segmentation at the volume level. I have seen this mistake so many times, and this is one of the reasons why sometimes your PPC is not working. You should never put on the same campaign a keyword that has a search volume of 10,000 with a keyword that has a search volume of 1,000. Why? Because the ratio in terms of different is so big that in Amazon Ads, given that this keyword has much higher search volume and therefore relevancy for this specific product, all the budget is going to go to that specific keyword. And therefore, if you don't do campaigns that is for high search volume, medium search volume, or low search volume, you're going to find the phenomenon, which I'm sure a lot of you are going to find if you go right now on your PPC dashboard, that only 3 or 4 keywords are getting all the spent and the rest are getting no impressions and clicks. That's the first thing about search volume. Second thing, the way you define what search volume you can attack is also highly dependent on what is the budget that you have allocated toward launch. Because the higher the search volume is, the higher is going to be the cost per click, because by nature there's more competition attached to it. That's why this is a question that should actually be asked even before launching the product throughout the product development phase. But let's say we come across and say, okay, I have identified that the search volume average is I'm gonna make you now basically a bandwidth of what usually you see between 1,000 and 10,000, and usually I have, let's say, 20 keywords in between. Right? Usually that's a very similar behavior you're gonna find. What I usually try to do is, most likely if you also go under the 1,000 mark, you're going to find a lot of keywords that have lower search volume, but usually the list is going to go from 20 keywords to maybe 50, 100 keywords, because you're going to find a lot of keywords that have a low search volume. Now, what is going to happen is, usually by norm, I only focus on the top 15 to 20 that define the ratio of the search volumes. Therefore, if between 1,000 and 10,000 is where I find the top 20 keywords, that's usually the boundary I would say from the best keyword to the 15 or 20, right? Because if you start going below that, is you're gonna dilute the effort. What is gonna happen? Your budget is gonna spread through things, and sometimes, given that you're not competitive enough on the main keywords, most of the budget is also gonna go by nature on the less competitive keywords. And yes, maybe you start getting more sales on the less competitive keywords, but at the end of the day, that's not what is gonna set your business for success in the long term. So I rather forget the ones that I know are not going to create the backbone of my business. Focus on those top 10 to 20 keywords, define that as the ratio of search volume, and then from there start going down as the momentum of sales is getting built up. Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Let's go to the next question. At what point in time, or what is an indication that I need to stop PPC, given a successful product, of course, or does PPC have to continue running as long as I'm selling this product?
Yeah. This is also a question I get a lot. Like people sometimes might do the assumption, which I understand, like PPC, I will only use it throughout the launch, and then I put it off, and that's it. Organically does the job. I wish it was like that. Unfortunately, PPC is something that has to be part of the strategy always. You will never reach a point where you can say PPC can be disconnected, and therefore I don't rely anymore on PPC, because what happens is that if you start doing that, essentially you're opening the back door of your home for anybody to come in, right? Because PPC at the end of the day, and that's the conversation we need to sometimes have, it's not only about sales, guys. It's also a defense strategy. Like when it comes to PPC, sometimes our strategy is not only about getting as many sales as possible, it's how I make sure I protect keywords in the ones that I'm already kind of dominating for other competitors to come in and eat the sales from me, because that eating of sales over time is gonna eat the market share, and therefore I'm gonna lose control, right? So therefore, to answer the question, is PPC is never a question if it's successful or not. It's more about if the product in the first place is profitable or not, because PPC have always to be part of it. So that's why I keep going back to a product development. Like you need to make sure in your margins, PPC is built, right? Like when I do this all the time when I do my PNN, in terms of how much it costs me to produce the product, my taxes, and my shipping and everything. I always also embed what on average I will spend on advertising to make sure that's all is there. Like even if in the future, like which can happen, and this will be something that can really change completely the panorama. Let's say you get position on one of these outlier keywords, as I mentioned, and you start getting a lot of organic sales. Yes, that's completely gonna potentially dilute your dependency on PPC. But for most people, PPC has to be a part of the margin. How I make the decision, to conclude the question, usually the decision I make to kill essentially PPC is, let's say I do my launch. It's been already 3 months on average. I wait, and by month 3, I have noticed that first of all, my organic ranking is nowhere. That means I have targeted main keywords. I have done my proper optimization on listings, but still I'm not good enough to compete with the big players in the category. If by month 3, I don't see any movement organically, that's already the signal to stop everything. Because what is going to happen is that if by month 3 I still have a high ACoS, but at the same time see, oh, I'm actually getting a bigger market share, like I check brand analytics, I'm increasing the click share, the impression share, sales, and everything. That means even if from a financial point of view results are not there yet, I'm entering the market, and I'm going start by start getting to a higher place. But if those KPIs are not moving and you still keep spending on PPC and you have 100, 200, 500 ACoS, guys, unfortunately, is if you already have done your of course your checks, which is, this is another thing we haven't gone in depth with, but when I say check, is making sure you have the best listing possible, the best images possible, competitive pricing, things that really make you stand out of the crowd. If you already made all that and your PPC is still at the place that is not converting, then unfortunately that's when I make the decision that I need to move into the next pro. Yeah.
All right, this next one is a pretty good one that I've been asked this a few times too. How do I scale a product with PPC? I've got good results with the campaign for the past 30 days. ACoS is under control. Click-through rate is good. Should I increase the budget or duplicate the campaign? Thank you.
Cool. So let's say your PPC is already performing and your click-through rate is good, which is one of the main metrics I keep mentioning. Some of the things you have to do next is, okay, this is the keywords I'm pretty much getting most of my sales from in terms of my PPC. And you want to start isolating those keywords as much as possible, because what you're going to identify most likely on those campaigns, when you start going deeper and deeper, most likely the ones that are driving most of the success is like 5 keywords, right? Therefore, usually if you follow the strategy of adding multiple keywords on a campaign, you're going to find that other keywords are diluting the efforts of going tunnel vision on the keywords that are giving you the ROAS that you need. Therefore, I will go on all my campaigns, making sure the keywords that have the good click-through rate and performance I need are kept in the legacy campaigns, which means the ones that already have history, and the keywords that haven't performed, I move them into new campaigns and therefore rinse and repeat. Usually winners stay in the campaigns where they're being winners. The losers, I remove them, and based on how bad they perform, I might retry them on a new campaign, or I might remove them altogether and re-engage on a new keyword research perspective. Yeah.
All right. We actually have a question from Bradley Sutton
Oh,
over here.
there you go.
I don't have too many search terms showing up on my ASIN product targeting campaigns, but I heard others get a lot of irrelevant search terms now instead of only ASINs. Is the only way to stop this is to put search terms in negative match or at the campaign level?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that question, Barney. Yeah. At the moment, it will be at the campaign level. Yeah. So this for those that might not know, when you actually target a specific ASIN, for whatever reason, that actually also shows you for search terms, right? And therefore, you appear for a specific search term. The issue with that is that it appears as a search term. It doesn't appear as a keyword. Therefore, if you negate it at the ad group level, essentially you're not negating it, because this is not even a keyword you're targeting in the first place. You're targeting an ASIN. So one way we have found, I mean, in between to you, Bradley, because sometimes we still see bypassing that. It will be at the campaign level. You negate at the campaign level, so that ASIN, the search term that generates, it doesn't basically get repeated. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. We have another one. I think this is going to be the last one. Lots of my products have several variations. When I create a PPC campaign, should I only select one variation for the campaign to target, or should I select multiple or all of the variations?
Good. So some of the things I usually do is, if you have historical, I'm going to give you two scenarios, because usually there's two scenarios. You have the scenario where you've been selling for a while and you have historical data. Therefore, that's very simple. You just go have a look which variation is the one that has the best conversion, and you go for that one. Now, the second approach is what most people goes across, which is you're going to launch this product with multiple colors, sizes, and all of that, and you don't know which one to go for. Usually your best friends for this is having a look at and I'm sure by then, if you're launching the product, you already understand the market, having a look at reviews of your competitors, which you can do with Healing 10, and then figure out what is the ratio of the color or the variation that is sold the most. So you start having some educated guess. That's one way of doing it. Then the second way of doing it is also with brand analytics. You can have a look at the specific ASIN that is being sold the most on that specific category. You can also use Pro Opportunity Explorer to get some insights around a specific variation that sell the most. So there's different sources of data you can combine and make this guess. And if you still somehow not decisive, because maybe all these sources doesn't really give you a clear answer, then the way I will go for is initially only I will put them all within the same campaign to see how this performs, because by nature, Amazon is gonna most likely start selecting one over the other based on KPIs of who click the most and who convert the most. And then that's gonna be my winner and my baseline for my rest of the campaigns I'm gonna create forward. Now, another thing, guys, when you start creating campaigns and you define a clear variation, let's say you define the clear winner is color red yoga mats, right? That's gonna be the one you're gonna use on all your generic keywords. Still, if you have blue, white, black, all these other colors, you still want to create the same resemblance of these keywords, but with the variation embedded in it, right? So, for example, let's say, as I give you the example, the red, blue, black yoga mats, then you want to have, for example, a campaign for red yoga mat, red exercise mat, red and you name it. And you do that with every single color, and then you can also mix the order and all of that, because that what is going to allow you to do is, while the main variation takes the pool of the search from the generic keywords, you still want to have a very strong presence on the long tail and more niche keywords that people is going to try to look for that specific variation, even if it's lower the demand. So you have a full spectrum control of the main market, the mainstream market, and then you have control of the more niche market at the keyword specific level.
Very good. Bradley, of course, is in the comments still, and he's saying, Vincenzo, did you know Carrie speaks Spanish? Talk to her a little in
¿Será
Spanish.
que comenzamos a
Sí.
hablar en español en este live?
Sí. Fuimos a Madrid juntos.
Sí, sí, lo pasamos bien, lo pasamos bien.
Yeah, sí. Sí, hablo un poquito de español. I speak a little bit of Spanish, so
Ah, pero
I haven't
se te
really
entiende
practiced in a
todo,
long time, so
se te
but
entiende,
yeah.
no te preocupes.
Gracias. But anyway, thank you so much, Vincenzo, for joining us on this Tacos Tuesday. It's always great to have you. You have so much knowledge, so much to share. Every time I've seen you speak or just share everyone, there's always some great info that people can take and do, basically put things right to work with their PPC. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing, answering all these questions, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Where can anyone
Yeah.
find you if they want to find you and reach you and maybe ask you questions or connect with your agency?
Sure. So you can find me as Vincenzo Toscano in all the social media channels. Like luckily, I'm the only one in the industry called Vincenzo, so it's going to be very easy to find me. When it comes to the agency, you can find Ecomcy also in all the channels. So go to our website, ecomcy.com, where you're more than welcome to book a free consultation with our team, and hopefully we can answer some questions and explore future partnerships. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much. And thank you everyone for joining and asking questions. And hopefully this was very helpful for you all in the audience. And we'll see you again next time. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Carrie. Bye bye.
Bye.